If you're joining us, we're just going to give it a couple of minutes just to everyone get in the webinar. But if you're here for the Super Bowl, you are in the right place. This is the System 1 debrief of the Super Bowl from yesterday. Who won and who lost in the big competition for the greatest ad? We'll just give it a few more seconds, everybody, just to make sure everyone can get in the into the Zoom door. And while you're there, actually, just to say, if you have a question while you're listening to this webinar, please do put it in the chat and in the Q&A rather. And then when we get to the end, we will do our best to answer your question. So I think it's about time, actually. So let's jump in. We've got a lot to talk about. It was quite a night yesterday. Anybody watching it, it was literally seat of the edge game, and congratulations to the Chiefs for winning in overtime. Okay, so just to introduce the webinar. Oh, excuse me. I'm your host for today. My name's Jon Evans. I'm the Chief Customer Officer over at System 1 and host of the Uncensored CMO podcast. And in fact, if you want to hear from someone who knows how to make Super Bowl advertising, my current episode is with Ricardo Marquez, who's the VP of Marketing over at Michelob. And I'm not going to say whether or not they might have done well, but they might have done well. Anyway, and then joining me on this webinar, I'm really delighted to be joined by Dawn Hudson. And I don't think we could have got a better person than Dawn, actually, because not only has she worked for a major advertiser at the Super Bowl, PepsiCo, she's also been CMO of the NFL. So if anyone knows what the Super Bowl is like from a brand management point of view and a sports right holder point of view, it is Dawn. So I'm going to come and introduce Dawn in a little bit. And what we're going to do is we're going to show you some of the data. We're going to take you halfway up the leaderboard, and then I'm going to jump in and talk to Dawn a little bit more about what it takes to make a great Super Bowl ad. So she will be on shortly. Okay, without further ado, let's jump in. All right, so what we've decided to do is, oh, excuse me 1 second here. Right, it's just firstly touch on the methodology, a really quick kind of intro into System 1 and how we do things. So basically we measure emotion, and the reason we measure emotion is that emotion predicts our behavior really well. And the reason we know this is that actually we've tested the impact of advertising media spend and the correlation to market share change over the next 12 months. And what we find is it has a positive but weakish correlation. So this is an example, and we've done lots of examples, but here's one example from an early category we looked at, where there's a 0.25 correlation between how much you spend and how effective you are at driving driving market share. Now, what happens when you add the star rating, which is the emotional response to the campaign itself, the correlation improves a lot. Now, the best stat I can give you here is the correlation between how much an NFL player is paid and how many yards they make is the same as the correlation between our star rating and market share change. So money spent in football and market share gained by someone who advertises in football is actually the same. So hopefully that gives you confidence that when we're talking about star rating, it also means business. These are the three kind of headline things that we use. So basically star rating is our prediction, and it is a prediction. Obviously, we don't know yet how it's done because we don't know all the other things that are going on, but it's the emotional response to the campaign and our prediction of how it will do, all things being equal. So assuming the right amount of media spend and everything else is the same. Spike rating is our short-term performance measure. So what we're doing here is we're looking at how strong the emotion was and how easy the brand was to recognize. Now that's super important. If you can't be remembered, then obviously your creative is not going to have the same impact that it might have done. Which brings me to the third measure, which is fluency rating, how easily people were able to attribute the advertiser to the spot. And that's the third rating. So we'll talk about all three. We'll focus on star rating, but we will definitely talk about spike rating and fluency because I think there are some key lessons to be learned there. All right, just quickly in terms of how we do it. So what's the science behind how we measure advertising's response? Well, we basically start with Paul Ekman's universal human emotions. So there are core human emotions we all feel. So when we were watching an ad last night, were we angry or disgusted? Were we happy? Were we sad? Were we surprised? Or did we feel nothing? And actually, feeling nothing is the enemy of advertising. So trying to make people feel something is the key job of an advertiser. Now, having looked at years and years of adverts and lots of case studies, lots of examples of brands that have created share change, we can work out which of these emotion has the biggest impact on share gain. And then we translate all that into a 5-star system where 5-star is exceptional and 1-star is not good. So 1-star means it has no potential impact on your brand over the next 12 months. 5-star means it could have on average a 3% share gain. Now, this depends a lot on category context, depends on competitors, depends on other things, but so this is an average across our database. And what we do is we actually test everything in the context of its category to try and refine those numbers on the right. All right, so how does Super Bowl advertising compare to the average? Well, this is quite interesting. It might surprise you actually to learn that actually Super Bowl advertising is a little bit, but not a lot better than the average in the US. So as you can see, the top level is the average Super Bowl star rating over the last few years. Last year was particularly good, actually, going to almost 3-star. The average in the US for all ads, and we measure every variety of category you can imagine, both activation ads and brand building ads, is about 2.3. So I suppose the first surprise is the standard is not as good as you might think, and certainly given the money spent might be a bit surprising. But what we'll see is, and we'll come to it in a second, is there's a big distribution of results. So there'll be quite a few down at 1-star, but there'll be quite a few at 3 and 4-star as well. So we can share what those are. So here's the distribution. So as you can see there, this year, actually, which is unusual, there were no 5-star ads, but there were quite a lot of 4-star. So you'll see those in a second. And then 3, 2, and 1-star were fairly evenly distributed below. So again, quite a spread of results. Now, that compared to standard distribution of all US ads would be much more skewed towards 1-star. So usually about 50% of ads in any particular category are 1-star. So Super Bowl advertising is doing better than average, as you can see here. All right, now I wanted to quickly stop and talk about spike rating. So what's quite interesting is if you look at spike rating rather than star, you actually see quite an interesting picture. So spike rating, as I said before, is a combination of emotional intensity and how easy the brand is recognized. Now, if you think about what Super Bowl is there to do, it's one big event, everyone's watching, everyone's talking about it. So actually spike rating is a very relevant measure of how likely people would be to share. Now, this is the ranking if we were to do the ranking on spike. So as you can see, Duncan, which I have to admit was the one that I woke up this morning and couldn't get out of my head. So incredibly well branded. It was impossible not to know who was being advertised. Very funny and created a lot of emotional intensity. So they did very well. Hellman's, if you were watching last night as well, had another funny one with a cat in and a play on mayo. So that was quite good. And Reese's was almost impossible to forget as well. So very well branded, very funny, very intense as well. Oreo was another good example of a brand using its fluent devices. So the twisting the Oreo and seeing if the cream is on the left or the right was very clever. And State Farm, another good example of using fluent devices and playing with the name as well, which we'll talk about in a minute. But anyway, I won't go through all of them. But if we were to judge this on spike, so in other words, the chance of getting talked about yesterday, this is what the leaderboard would have looked like. Okay, moving on. So what we're going to do now is going to count down from 11. We decided, by the way, to go for a starting 11 because there are 11 players on each team on the pitch. So we've got a top 11 for you rather than the top 10. Now, this was one of the best performing rookie performances of last night, and it was from Pfizer. A very, very impressive ad here where they're telling the story of Pfizer over 175 years and their mission to cure cancer and all the breakthroughs that have happened over time. An incredibly powerful twist at the end as well, which really did lift happiness at the end there. And they got a very impressive 3.8. And anyone who's worked in pharma advertising will know just how difficult it is to get people to feel something on an emotive subject like this. Okay, counting down to number 10. Number 10, a regular in the Super Bowl. M&M's one of the best performing brands of all time on our database of Super Bowl advertising. Very, very familiar characters, the M&M characters, scoring a 3.9. So again, that's probably in line with about their average, actually. So they usually are in the top 10, sometimes in the top 5. So they've got a very good history in the Super Bowl. Number 9, Mr. T. So a good 80s reference there for anyone who remembers the A-Team in a Skechers ad. So very impressive here, getting 3.9, so almost into 4-star territory, and doing a very good job too. All right, moving up to number 8. So number 8, one of my personal favorites, actually. I think if you're looking for a good brand idea that's delivered creatively, I think this was exceptional. And this actually got the highest fluency or branding of any ad last night. It was impossible not to know which brand it was, and they played around with the twist, Oreo twist, to reveal different scenes that could have, different moments in history that could have ended differently had they twisted the other way. So a very, very clever way of using their brand assets there. All right, number 7. This is an interesting one. Bud had quite an interesting year, as we all know. And so I think a lot of people were keen to find out how they're going to approach Super Bowl. I think they nailed it, because what they did with this ad is they went back to what they do best, using the Clydesdales and going back in history, reminding everyone of their heritage. And I think that was a really, really smart move. And it paid off, as you can see here, getting number 7 with a score of 4.2. Okay, number 6. And Dawn, I'm really happy. I have to ask you about this ad, because Dawn was CMO at the NFL for 10 years, so she'll know very much about how they approach things. A really emotive ad here, very, very inspiring, and getting into the top 6 with a score of 4.3. All right, so talking of NFL, talking of Dawn, I'm going to stop sharing for a moment and jump off, and we're going to have a quick chat with Dawn. So, Dawn, we were just talking there, weren't we, about the NFL, and it's great to see the NFL themselves doing such a good job of their own advertising. What did you think?
Well, the NFL, I love that spot, right? I mean, the NFL has a history of half of its fans are outside the United States. And if you go back 20 years ago, they tried to put like a developmental league in Europe, and it wasn't accepted. The European fans said, if I'm going to see football, I want to see the real deal. I want to see American football. So they've worked hard to get games in the UK, France, and Germany. And as a result, it's now they're trying to say, hey, anybody can play for the NFL. And from a talent-based standpoint, let's try to get a lot of people. They may think about what we call soccer, you call football, playing that, but you can play football and you can dream about being a football star. And, you know, it's always good for the NFL, regardless of whether it's an international message or a domestic message, to just reinforce the sheer joy and the learning and the skills that kids playing football get so much more than just learning how to play the game. They learn to be part of a team. They learn how to take tough knocks and how to get up from it. They learn how to dream. And so showing this kid who has a dream of being in the NFL and then able to do it, I just thought it was so spot on for the brand. And to be honest with you, before, I don't take credit for it. I do with my team. But the NFL had a history when it does a deal with like CBS this year as the broadcast partner, they get a number of free spots within the broadcast that they can use. And they traditionally use them for public service announcements and done very well. But lately, then we started to say, wait, we can use them for brand building. And I would say that was a brand building spot. It was talking about the joy of youth playing football. Happened to be from an international perspective, but I thought it was terrific.
It was brilliant, wasn't it? Now, you've worked at Pepsi in very senior roles, and you've also obviously worked at the NFL. What would be your personal favorite Super Bowl ad that you've ever been involved in?
Oh, well, then I have to pick one I've been involved in, right?
Of course, yeah.
And you know, you might not understand too. I grew up in the advertising business, so I was on the other side of the table, you know, creating the ads. And then I shifted over to the client side and came up through the marketing menu, and then ended up at the NFL. So it's the Super Bowl, what it takes. I have such an appreciation for it's such a large investment, but it is such a large audience, and the opportunity to get it right or to not use your money well. So I have a great appreciation for it. I probably, I'll be honest with you, part of my job at the NFL was to oversee the team that actually put the Super Bowl on. That was more nerve-wracking than trying to create a commercial for the Super Bowl to make sure. Make sure that you didn't damage the field when you brought all the halftime equipment on, and that you got it off at the end of in exactly the amount of time you were allotted. That was nerve-wracking.
That does look stressful, doesn't it? The amount of changeover that happens, like when we were watching Usher yesterday, the entire field changed in a matter of minutes, didn't it?
Yes, and then you have to change it back, and you cannot hurt the field, of course, because they're play on the field. So yeah, it is a Herculean, task, performed and tried and true until it's really done. But no matter how much you practice, it's just the moment. What happens with the weather, So anyway, it's fun. It's actually fun for me. For many, I've been lucky enough to attend over probably a dozen Super Bowls. And when I'm there, I'm generally working, whether it's with Pepsi, handling customers, or whether it's for the NFL, handling sponsors, making sure things are going right behind the scenes. I never really get to sit down and watch. And if you're at the NFL, you don't get to see the ads. So it was a pleasure last night to be able to just sit and watch the game and the ads.
No stress of organizing anything. You can just enjoy yourself.
Yeah, but I will tell you, ask me my favorite Super Bowl ad. So I'm just going to be, I got to be self-serving a little bit, but there was an ad. I think I'd have to tell you, this is an emotional ad. It's not a top ad, but there's two NFL ads I was really proud of. One was called Super Bowl Babies, and it was going to be the 50th anniversary of the Super Bowl. And so we had this idea, or the agency had this idea, about going and finding people who were conceived the night their parents' favorite team won the Super Bowl. And they celebrated, and they ended up having a child 9 months later. So we got all the clubs involved. We found out all these, what years they'd won the Super Bowl and which of their fan base were born 9 months later. And some of them were, babies, and we had, up to people much older. And then we did a commercial with Seal with all these Super Bowl babies. And it was just a celebration of the fun of being part of the Super Bowl. I think it was a top 10 ad by some measurements, not the breaker. The one that got more attention was one that we did in 2018. And it was an ad. What had happened during the year is it was a culmination of a couple of years of sort of bad press for the NFL, whether, we had domestic violence issues, we had Deflategate, we had kneeling, all of which polarized our fan base. And we just wanted to get back to the celebration of football. And one of the things that fans love, obviously, is when a touchdown happens, let alone a touchdown in the Super Bowl. So the football operations actually relaxed the rules, so the players had a little bit more time after a touchdown to celebrate, and they got to planning as a team what they would do when they got a touchdown. And so since it's a Super Bowl and there's only two teams in the Super Bowl, we wanted to focus on, okay, it's a reset. The draft happens after Super Bowl. Teams reset for the next year. Let's take a team like the Giants and let's have them practicing what they're going to do when they have a whole lot more touchdowns in 2019. That was the theory anyway. And we did a takeoff on Dirty Dancing, and as what the Giants were going to do to celebrate when they got with Eli Manning. Anyway.
Brilliant. No, that sounds fantastic. And what would be your tips, having kind of seen it from a brand side and also property right?
And Odell Beckham Jr., I should say, because he was the guy who was lifted.
He wasn't he? Yeah.
Yes.
What would be your top tips for getting Super Bowl right? Because there's a lot of money riding on this. There's a lot of reputation. I'm sure there are careers made and lost based on how well the Super Bowl goes. So what are your tips on how to get it right?
My tips are really starting at the beginning, saying why do I need a Super Bowl ad? I mean, it's great to have a Super Bowl ad. It's nice to have one of your ads recognized as funny, but you're about effectiveness, right? And is that large investment? We talk $7 million for a 30-second spot, like almost double that for a 1-minute spot. Add the celebrity cost, add the production value, and you're talking, well over $10 million. And how are you going to get a return on it? So I think about, what do I want? It is a platform to get a lot of people to see your brand. And I think the most successful ads from a long-term standpoint, as your system one points out, are those which have a real purpose behind why they're using that stage, that platform, to tell people something about their brand. So one of the easiest is, you got news, talk about the news, something that's different, take advantage of it. So, a great example of that this year would be Reese's, right? And I love how they did. They broke through, and they did it without any celebrities, and they did it the fun of, oh, you're going to change my Reese's. Oh, I don't like that. Okay, you're going to add crema. Oh, I like that. You're not going to make enough. I'm terrible. Oh, you're going to make more. Oh, by the way, are you going to change the original? I mean, it was just perfect. I thought it was really wonderful. Another reason would be, for a long time, there was a glue or a lock ad that would be on every year, once a year. And it was to be, hi, get the name out there, right? So this year I think of, I think CeraVe. I mean, I've spent some time in skincare, and there's a lot of products out there that promise that they'll get rid of lizard-like skin. And CeraVe is a big brand, but I think people pause and say, how do I pronounce it? And I thought it was just brilliant to take an actor like Michael Cera and use that Cera play off CeraVe, and he is the goddess of skin cream and softening. I thought it was very good. Where sometimes I think, people are going to just be funny to get their brand out there. And there may be a purpose for that too, if your brand is a little staid. I think the Dunkin' ad. Dunkin' is known by everybody. It's on every corner step. America runs on Dunkin'. But there's a currency and a talk value. And are you sort of yesterday's news? And so I think then using a Super Bowl ad to say, I'm not yesterday, I'm really fun, and I'm doing something contemporary, that works. So I think of news. I think of a purpose why you want to get your name recognized out there. I think wanting to change image or perception of who you are. Those are really good reasons that that amount of money can pay off. Yeah. And I think, some of them are just cute, clever, and I even forget sometimes the brand name associated with it and why it was done.
I think that's why the Dunkin' one for me was a standout, because I could not forget who it was, even though it had some A-list Hollywood actors in it. It was very well done. It was still Dunkin' that was the hero and the thing you got left with. Whereas I think some of the others, you kind of went, oh yeah, which was the one with Usher in again at the end. You could easily sort of forget who was advertising.
But as a football person, I wanted to see Tom Brady dance more.
Yes, of course.
He got to clap or hit the drum or something, but he didn't get to show his dance moves the way Ben Affleck did.
Now, one of the dilemmas everyone always seems to have every single year is, do you keep your ad as a surprise on game night, or do you release early? Do you do a teaser? Any advice on the pros and cons of kind of going a bit early with a Super Bowl commercial?
So everything has an ebb and flow in life, I think. And something's in, then it's out, then it's fashion's in, back in again. And, I do remember it was considered sacrilegious. Pepsi was one of the first to actually put an ad online before it debuted. And that was, oh, you're going to ruin it. People aren't. So we took a point of view of, I'm not sure I'm going to ruin it. They'll see it once. But how about you? I've got to see commercials a couple of times to appreciate them. And then when we first did it, actually it was an ad with Britney Spears, and we had a couple of endings, and we let the fan base vote on which ending they liked better. And we actually took the ending that the fans liked the most. And in the process, we got a lot of database of people that opted in for marketing at Pepsi. So it's very strategic. And now then everybody went to releasing their ads on air early. So now I think it's almost like the reverse, which is maybe you want to keep it a secret. Like, I don't know, a couple friends, children are having babies. They all know the sex. And then one friend is deciding to be surprised. And I'll probably be more interested in, oh, did she have a boy or a girl? Because it's a surprise. So odd correlation. But I think that maybe we're going to see the pendulum slide back a little bit, because you can go online afterwards and you can blow it up afterwards. The beauty of these ads, if they do well, is people keep watching them again and again.
You're right, because if everyone releases early, then you're into the same problem that you're having to compete with everybody else again. So going early only works if you're one of a minority that chooses to do that.
Or if there's, again, a reason you go early, because you've got a contest and you're going to announce the contest winner, or there's a or you have two flavors and you don't know which one you're going to launch, or, you know.
Yeah. I mean, one thing we tested actually system one is we did the test of those that went early versus those that didn't, and there's no penalty creatively for going early. So there's no evidence that people are somehow are worn out of your ad. You know, if anything, the evidence is slightly the other way, that actually seeing it a few times before makes it more familiar and more likable.
And again, too, you're taking your measurement of effectiveness right after the Super Bowl. If someone chose to just debut it on the Super Bowl, their effectiveness might build, because if people really liked it, they'd go back and look at it. And one of the things that, you know, I'm very cognizant is the number of people that have Super Bowl parties. And whether you're serving the food or you're talking to people, it's hard to just say, you know, be quiet and I'm just going to watch the game and the commercials. And so a lot of times in the, you know, parties I've been at, I can see the ad. I can't actually hear it fully. So, hey, that could be a note to remember. It's very visually interesting, but you're going to follow up the next day or two and watch it again.
Well, I'm sure people in the bar I was in last night were getting worried, because I was like eating while the football was on. Then they got to commercial. I'm like, can everyone be quiet, please? I want to pay attention.
And how did that work for you?
So, I think I was bribing the barman to turn the volume up during the commercial break. There we go. Anyway, Mad Dogs and Englishmen. Listen, what we're going to do, let's jump back into the countdown. Let's find out who's won based on the System 1 star rating. And there's lots of comments coming through in the chat, which is amazing. And we'll come back and talk a little bit more. So if you'll all bear with me, I will just reshare my screen and we'll count us down to find out who's won the Super Bowl of advertising according to System 1. All right. So hopefully you're back with me on the presentation now. Okay, at number 5, a rookie advertiser here, Lindt, showing off their chocolate here in a very beautiful way. And this is a good example of where brands should know they can use their Fluent devices. So the master chocolatier here for Lindt is a wonderful character that appears in a lot of their advertising. And it's also a good example of where you don't need to be afraid to show your product. So showing off chocolate when you're advertising Lindt is a very good thing to do. So a good score there, 4.4, coming at number 5. All right, number 4, T-Mobile. T-Mobile has got great history in the Super Bowl. In fact, it's the second most effective advertiser of all time, our database, and they're back at it again, getting a very, very good 4.5. This is a good example of characters, one story unfolding, using humor as well, and a dance as well to show the feeling of using T-Mobile. So they nailed the basics incredibly well in this spot here. Now, for the top 3, what we're going to do is we're going to show you the ads. I know you've been watching all this time and not seen an ad yet. So we're going to solve that now and show you the top 3 ads. You can enjoy them. And what we're also going to do is show you the face trace that we use at System 1, which is the second-by-second emotional response. So people feeling happy, sad, neutrality, etc. So you'll see that in a second. So at number 3, we have, here it is, Hellmann's.
Leftover chicken, scallions, cheese. What am I gonna make with this? Meow. Meow. Hellmann's, you can talk. And then she says, meow. And boom, Hellmann's saves the leftovers. She can't spell. Line!
Now, our keynote speaker.
Meow. Hey, is it serious?
You lasted longer than most.
There you go. So a really funny ad, good use of characters, lots of humor there, and it's impossible not to see who's advertising. So just to explain this chart here, so these are the emotions as the ad goes on. So light green is happiness, dark green is surprise. So lots of surprise up and down as the jokes come in, lots of happiness building, getting to a peak end, and not too much neutrality here. A few people are slightly irritated by this, but you can't please everyone. But overall, a really good score of 4.5. And as you can see down here, by about 12 seconds, almost everybody had worked out it was Hellmann's mayonnaise. So again, in terms of branding, absolutely nailed. So congratulations there to Hellmann's. In at number 3. All right, so at number 2, we have, and we talked about this brand earlier, Dawn and I in our chat, this is Reese's.
We're making a big change to Reese's Peanut Butter Cups. No! We're adding a delicious layer of caramel.
Yes! I love caramel!
but we're only making a few of them. A few million.
Wait, are you still selling the regular cups?
Yep. New Reese's Caramel Big Cup.
I love the fact there's even a dog doing a hula hoop at the end there. So the details are amazing. But again, just like the one before, really, really strong amounts of happiness. You can see happiness building incredibly quickly there and lasting throughout, which is brilliant. The humor's carrying it a lot. Some surprise coming in as well. Tiny bit of sadness happening as people thought that there weren't going to be many limited editions. So there you go. Just goes to show the audience are having the same reaction as the cast. Incredibly well branded. I mean, there were 72 adverts in the Super Bowl yesterday. So to be able to get this amount of fluency for your brand this early on and throughout is just exceptional. So massive congratulations to Reese's there. Top job. 4.7, almost the best ad of last night. Not quite though. So counting down to number one, the best ad based on star rating, emotional response, and how people felt was this one.
Hola.
Maybe a different beer?
No, Michelob Ultra.
Okay, be right back.
I can't wait a moment more.
That's messy.
Wait, you mean Leo? We go way back.
Say it's me that you adore. And then, darling, tell me when.
Dan the mayor. Come on, he's not even trying out there.
Mr. Messi.
Tell me quando.
Michelob Ultra, superior light beer.
Now, I think what I love about this is who doesn't like drinking beer on the beach and playing football? So, the irony, of course, that we've got a soccer player in a football match. There you go. So I thought that was quite funny. But as you can see from the chart up there, enormous amounts of happiness. I mean, this is very unusual to get that amount of happiness that you're seeing on the right. That's a very, very, very good performance. And again, because the brand is served at the beginning, you know what it is throughout, which is great. And this is a great example of what Orlando Wood talks about in his book Look Out, about right brain features. So you've got one scene that unfolds, you've got characters that are having a lot of betweenness, he calls it. So passing the ball and looks between each other. The other thing, of course, as well, is it's a brilliant soundtrack. And I think the soundtrack really does lift the feeling, and it's hard to watch this and not feel good about the brand as a result. So. And as I said, if anyone wants to find out how the ad was made, a bit more about the strategy and the history that Michelob have got at the Super Bowl, you can do on the latest edition of the podcast. So congratulations, they made it to number one. And then we've got a few slides coming up in terms of data and trends and our top advice on how you can win the Super Bowl and our top plays for creative effectiveness. Okay, now this is lovingly known as the Andrew Tyndall chart. So Andrew and I were chatting last week. Wouldn't it be good to talk about not just star rating, but also fluency? Because at the end of the day, there are over 70 ads going out at Super Bowl night, and you want to be remembered as well as creating an emotional response. So he's pulled this chart together to look at the axes between on the bottom star rating and on the top fluency rating. So which the brands that are doing a great job of both. So you can see there on the right-hand side, the ranking from 1 to 11 of our star performers. And you can also see how they're doing on fluency. Now, this is where again, going back to Orlando, what he talks about fluent devices like the Clydesdale horses, for example, the M&M characters. Those things are so important because what they allow you to do is be recognized in the ad without having to talk about your brand per se, because they're just, the characters just embedded. And what we find on our database is when we look at all ads using celebrity versus all ads using fluent devices, there's almost a star difference. So fluent devices are definitely one of the big hacks of Super Bowl if you can get them right. And they also wear in over time. So as people get more familiar with them, they're easier to recognize. And the other good thing is they're cheap. So they don't cost you as much as a celebrity. And in fact, I should say one of the very best on the right is Oreo. So Oreo did that incredibly well. using the biscuit itself as a fluent device. So some great examples there, and lots of kudos to the brands that did that well. Okay, what we thought we'd also do, and Dawn, I'm going to come and ask you about this in a little bit when we come back to the chat, is USA Today is probably the sort of main source of who's won the Super Bowl. And what we thought we'd do is just compare their top 10 to our top 10, which I found quite fascinating. I mean, if you look at the top 5, they all correlate very closely to our spike rating. So spike rating is kind of probably measures short-term response, likelihood to talk about it, likelihood to go online, likelihood to go in store, and also how easy the brands are to remember. So our spike rating seems to marry up pretty well. They had State Farm in at number 1, which was one of our best on spike. Dunkin', as I talked about before, again, very high spike, as were Kia, Uber Eats, and the NFL themselves. So certainly at the top, it looks like USA Today and our spike rating is where the correlation happens. But beyond that, on star rating, actually, there's only NFL and Bud getting a 4-star matching up to theirs. So some quite divergence in the results there. And then looking through at some of the trends as well. So how did the rookies perform? Well, this is an interesting one. We did a piece of work at System 1 a few years ago called Scaling Up Without Screwing Up, which was looking at first-time advertisers versus established advertisers. And we saw a big difference between the standard when a brand goes on TV the first time versus one that's been on TV for a long time. Now, this isn't true, obviously, here because everyone's experienced at making TV ads. But in terms of being a rookie to the Super Bowl, how do the rookies perform versus the veterans, shall we say? And actually, there's quite a big difference. So 2.2 plays 2.9. So you can see that there is quite a gap between first-time Super Bowl advertisers and established. The ones that nailed it, though, 3 new rookies absolutely smashed it. So Lindt, as I said, superb job at 4.4. Pfizer with their first Super Bowl ad at 3.8. And Popeyes doing another great job at 3.7. So it just goes to show that being a rookie doesn't necessarily mean you can't compete with the best and do very well. So well done to them. And then who use celebrities well? So as I was saying before, actually celebrity is a funny dynamic because what we find on average with our database is that celebrities themselves don't make a difference overall. About 56%, I think, of ads this year were using a celebrity. It's usually up around 60%. So lots of celebrities involved this year. A few celebrities appearing in more than one ad as well. But actually some of the ads, some of the brands did use celebrities well. And I think the key is to use celebrities for what they're famous for. Messi obviously being a great example, doing the beach soccer, Mr. T and Skechers, another example of that as well. So celebrities can be great, but they're not a guarantee of success. So if you think you're going to put a celebrity in your ad and make it work, then you need to do a bit more than just that. And then what about fluent devices? Well, this is what I was talking about earlier. So whether it's the Clydesdale horses, the M&M's characters, or the Master Chocolatier from Lindt, fluent devices are one of the biggest hacks in advertising. They enable you to be recognized. They also create feeling because people associate good things with you via the fluent devices. And these are 3 good examples of brands that have got that absolutely right. So what are our game day themes? So looking at this, and again, the teams just had less than 24 hours to get their head around all this, looking at the results coming in last night. So a massive, massive thank you to everybody on the System 1 team that stayed up very late last night and got up very early this morning to go and put this analysis together. We found 5 kind of common themes, really, in terms of tips for how to make a great Super Bowl ad. First thing is tell a good story. So a story that unfolds, takes you on a journey, just like a good movie or a good kind of Netflix series. Tell a good story. Does well. Example there for Hellmann's. Keeping the idea simple as well. I mean, what we noticed a lot last night is that brands were trying to do too much. There were a lot of complicated jokes, a lot of fast cut scenes, a lot of, if you looked at the DoorDash one, for example, trying to achieve a lot in a short space of time. Whereas actually keeping an idea simple like T-Mobile did is a great example of where it can pay off because people can get the idea and get it quickly. I think this is probably the funniest Super Bowl I've seen in the 5 years I've been commentating on the Super Bowl. There was a lot of humor on display, which is great. And we are seeing evidence that humor as a tactic in advertising is having a bit of a renaissance. So it's good to see a lot of laughs going on. And also the kind of, slapstick, everyday humor that, not being too clever, but just going for straightforward laughs. And that's paid off as well. And I think Reese's is a really good example of doing that. as I said in my previous comment, use celebrities well. I think the ones that did, it paid off well for them. And then the final point, which I've already mentioned a couple of times, is use fluent devices. Create things that make you remembered. And particularly when you're up against such big competition, that is essential. All right, so now what we're going to do, I'm going to come off screen and we're going to go back to Dawn and open it out to all of you. So I'll stop sharing. We'll come back. So let me just jump into the Q&A and see what we've got. Interesting question. How has the subject of sustainability performed? Did we see this in the data? Oh, right. Let's split this question slightly into two then. So last year was interesting because there were a few ads with sustainability in. The ones that did best actually were the ones that use humor. So there was a General Motors ad, which was a 60-second ad. It was very funny about basically how they were losing out to Norway, because in Norway there's more EVs bought per person than in the US. And they were trying to fix it. So that was a good example of where you can use humor very well. And actually, if you want to find out about sustainability, we have got a recent publication called The Green Print, which is a really good look at how advertising can communicate environmental messages and do it effectively. Because you have to think quite carefully about how to do it. But humor was a good one used last year.
Could I add to that?
Jump in.
I think there's a lot of evidence. 5 or 10 years ago, it was great that any brand was just talking about sustainability. Now there's higher expectation. And I think a brand has to really make a significant impact on sustainability, have sustainability to be DNA to the brand and significant for me to put it on the Super Bowl. Because if you're just doing something that's a throwaway, hey, it's cool to talk sustainability, but you used to be, I think of plastics, all right? You're doing a little bit better job at plastic management, but still plastics is a huge problem. That's probably not an area to go to. You really need to be doing it for the right reasons. And I think it needs to be very connected to what the brand is about.
Yeah, that's top advice. I mean, we found that in our research, actually, that the connection to the brand and authenticity is incredibly important. This is one, Dawn, you might have a good point of view on. So Eric's asked whether the length of ad makes a difference. So is it easier to tell your story if you've got 60 seconds or 90 seconds compared to 30? Now, given how much money it costs, what are the kind of decisions you were taking when you were on Pepsi in terms of how much airtime to take?
Well, I think there's a belief and some justification. Longer is better to stand out. The butt of it is, to me, if longer makes you sloppier and makes you put more stuff in there that actually kind of distract from the message you're trying to deliver about your brand, about your product, then length can actually be a detriment. And I know in some ads, I remember a 2-minute Super Bowl ad for the NFL. It was great. It was 100-year celebration, great ad, but I thought it went on too long. And we are such a digital society where we look at our phones for seconds at a time that, you have to have a really good reason. I think there could be very good messages and very good breakthrough for a 30. In fact, if you look at your scores, most of the surprise actually happens at the beginning of the commercial. Sometimes you have a payoff at the end, and then there's downtime in the middle. So if I were contemplating next year going on, I'd be trying to see, I'd rather have 2 great messages, 30 seconds each, than one at 60.
Yeah, no, our data completely backs it up. In fact, we find the sweet spot is up about 30, long enough to tell your story, short enough that the audience don't get bored, and then it drops off. And then by about 60 and 90, it kind of drops off quite a long way. So yeah, all the data certainly backs it up. I think David in the chat here might be a System 1 person in disguise. I don't know, or we'll have to hire him. Has there been any work done to see the difference in performance for campaigns that were tested at early stage versus finished film? So love that question.
A question I had when I was head of marketing.
Yeah. Indeed. And that obviously I can't say who they are, but there were a couple of the winning campaigns that we've just seen that were tested. The thing we find on average is there's probably like on average about a 1-star difference between early stage and late stage based on our testing, can be up to 2-star. I mean, certainly the winner of the Super Bowl a couple of years ago was one that we had tested, and that had gone from mid 2 stars up to around 5 stars. So it's certainly possible. It's not a guarantee, of course, because you can also go down as well as up. But we've got some good examples of ones that have worked.
Well, I'd add into that, if you're measuring emotional connection, there's probably a few ideas for commercials that are readily understood, but I would say the majority need that production value to bring that emotion to life, and that hence why the star ratings go up when it's fully produced.
Yeah.
That said, the testing early stage can say, do they get the message that I'm trying to convey? Do they get what I'm trying to say about my brand?
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah, no, that's spot on. I mean, the early stage, we're often looking for, is the idea resonating? Is the takeout right? Is the emotion the one you want? What's the message? All those kind of things. Once you've got that, you can then produce it and make it brilliant. Couple of comments here. So Stuart said, how on earth did 100% of people not recognize it as Reese's? I got to agree with him, actually, because that was just the most branded ad ever. So well done. And it's funny, isn't it? I mean, I know you'll be the same, but the amount of debates you have with the creative agency about, do we wait till the end to tell them who we are? They just went all in, and proudly so, which is nice. Patricia's made it. This is probably a comment. Actually, I had this feeling as well, Dawn, that the Michelob Ultra one has got Pepsi vibes to it, hasn't it? Because obviously, Pepsi
there have been a number of commercials in the past that have used Pele, that have used beach scenes.
Yeah.
Very reminiscent of Pepsi ads. And what I take from that, I often used to say when I was heading marketing, is that, even in the agency, it's not like there's a whole lot of new ideas out there.
Yeah.
It's new ideas and how they're applied to be effective for your brand. So, okay, if something, but if you're borrowing just for borrowing's sake, don't do it. But if it's a real reason, have a party on the beach with Michelob Ultra. I think the one of the good things about Michelob Ultra, right? It is a lower calorie, non-carb beer. It would be very easy to introduce and build that brand as kind of a woman's brand, right? And that would, given that men drink more beer volumetrically than women, that would be holding back the size and scale the brand could get to. So to say this is a mainstream brand, something that, an athlete is going to wait for and have a great time while he's waiting, it worked for the brand.
It did. Beauty executed as well. Dan and Fiona got a similar question here in the chat as well, to say, how come Duncan didn't make our top 11, and why was the star score so low? So Duncan came top of Spike. So Spike is the strength of emotion and how fast the branding was. So they absolutely nailed that. There were a few people that didn't like Duncan, and therefore some negative, if you look at the face trace, some negative emotion. So it annoyed some people, right? So the small percentage, maybe about 10% of the audience were slightly annoyed, and that kept it out of the top 11 from a star rating point of view. But the Spike rating was exceptional. So it's sometimes...
Well, I have a funny comment on that to make.
Yeah.
That is the annoyance factor, okay?
Yeah.
I always just say, put a baby or put a dog in an ad, and you'll get some extra clicks. That's been my experience. I mean, I love E-Trade. I love those babies. And like Clydesdale, it was the dog that was the hero, right?
It was.
Cats are polarizing, right? You have a little bit of negativity on Mayo Cat. I'm going to bet because some people don't like cats.
Good advice. We'll have to do a study onto which animals have got the best uplifts. But actually, one of my favorite ones, talking babies, actually, a couple of years ago, Huggies won our rating. And the thing I thought they did brilliantly, not only was it just very funny, but they actually filmed babies born on Super Bowl morning into their commercial, a bit like you were saying about tracing back to, those conceived on Super Bowl day of the past. I thought that was very clever. So finding a story to weave in, a relevant story to Super Bowl to weave into your ad is great.
I think it helps. A story helps people remember the ad.
Yes.
It had a bunch of visuals and emotive music,
Yeah.
but not a storyline. It's not as memorable.
Yeah, completely. Question here about Jennifer Aniston. We didn't touch on Uber. Uber Eats got a strong 3-star, I think, from memory. So they're just outside the kind of top 11, but didn't quite do enough to get in the top. So I think and the humor was interesting because actually we tested interesting one here. Their teaser we tested in the UK and the US. The humor worked better in the UK. The whole kind of Beckham's getting confused about the Spice Girls name. So I think that's one of those ones that culturally you just got to get the tone right and tap into the right, right sense of humor.
I think this is just me, but I think they were trying to say Uber delivers more than what you think about. And then they tried to make an analogy to things you forget about. And I just think it was a little awkward, and they didn't maybe set it up that well. So it wasn't as clear. Oh, Uber delivers all these things. Oh, okay. Therefore I should remember that because sorry, that's my dog in the background.
Dogs in ads, always
like
good.
to be in a Super Bowl ad. That's
He's
probably
auditioning.
a pack of dogs walking by outside. Any rate, so I personally think that's where the brand connection to the idea of forgetting names and forgetting things to me wasn't as strong as it could have been.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Interesting question here, anonymous question about why. Do you have any hypothesis as to why our ranking in USA Today diverged on star rating? I mean, look, the correlation looked quite close on Spike, but on star rating, overall emotional appeal, our results were quite different to USA Today.
Well, you will know better than I do, but my recollection is on USA Today, they put about 25 people in a room, so it's probably smaller than the pool that you do, and they give them a dial. And so their methodology favors that burst of humor or emotion that gets the big dial turn. I also think it's why the ads that run in the first or second quarter do better on USA Today, because I think people get tired toward the end and they don't jerk that meter as much. So I think there's something in the methodology that makes for different outcome.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Question here, did we rate the halftime show? That's a great question. We did last year and we probably could do again. I like that. So I'll note that for the team to have a look at, because it was interesting how I was watching a lot of social media on it and pretty universally liked, actually, although there were some didn't. So anyway, but that was quite an impressive halftime show. Does System 1 have any guidance on the use and effectiveness of sonic devices? Oh, that's a good one. The answer is yes. In fact, we did a report recently called Listen Up, looking at basically how sound is used, audio advertising is used, and how it appeals to kind of our brain and what triggers it, in a positive way. It's a fascinating report. So do head to the system1group.com website or Google Listen Up, and you can download a free report on that, which would be very good. Any sense?
Somebody says today changed their format. Oh, good. Using thousands of consumers to sign up to rate them on a 10-point scale. So that should make it more similar then. You're right.
There we go. So we have to dig out what questions they're asking and how they're asking it. I have a suspicion it's more similar to our Spike rating. That's certainly what the result. It's a very close correlation.
Well, that's my point. Of traditionally, they just put more value. They're trying to get who has the biggest quick emotive reaction, and that generates the ratings. Or you're trying to look at sort of the overall effect and its linkage back to the brand. That's
it. Any insights around political ads and movie trailer ads? Oh, interesting. Actually, I made a bit of a faux pas on CBS this morning because I referred to the RFK ad as JFK's ad. Anyway, because I was just thinking about JFK in the ad that he did, because it traced anyway. So that was quite funny. But yeah, political advertising's, oh man, it's hard work, isn't it, to put that in a Super Bowl and expect a big audience reaction. But that was a 1-star. Yeah, do. Well,
the thing I'd say about, in general, the brand and agency, it's very polarizing to get into any kind of political subject. And if you're trying to have this flat platform that reaches so many people from so many walks of life, you're just running the risk that you shut down if you get into politics. Now, I think having an independent candidate do their message was somewhat brilliant, only because this is a year where people, the majority of people, don't like either leading candidate on either side. So it's it was more, I think, a statement of, wouldn't we wish we had some options here?
Yeah.
So I thought probably a good time to do it. Maybe not a good time most years.
If there's ever a year to do it, you're quite right. That makes a lot of sense. You mentioned Pfizer's spike was strong. What specifically was good about this ad? I'm from the UK, so maybe don't have the same connection to brand. So I think the thing with Pfizer is they very cleverly wove in the story of the brand. So, you know, from Charles Pfizer and 175 years. So they use kind of clever, fluent devices throughout the film, which is good. So you knew kind of what it was. And then go and have a look at the ad, because in the final scene, there's a young girl having her wristband cut off, and then she's being applauded as she leaves the hospital, which is just the most emotional ending you can possibly imagine. And it's signaling the fact that, you know, they're on a mission to cure cancer. So yeah, a very emotional end, coupled with some very good branding.
I think from a US standpoint that I could be wrong, but that Pfizer was so connected to the COVID vaccines that I wouldn't be surprised if, from a brand standpoint, over the last 3 or 4 years, they came to be known as the COVID vaccine company. And of course, COVID vaccines, people are getting them, but they're down. They're not as hot a topic. So I think they really needed to remind people that they're very a broad, strong pharmaceutical, and take the number one or one of the top medical issues people around the world have, cancer, and saying we're really working on. But I think it was a way of reminding people of the scale and impact of Pfizer today, and trying to get away from what I think happened over the last couple of years.
I totally agree. I think that's a big factor for them, without a doubt. Comment from Declan here. Can you compare the difference between creatively awarded ads and effective ads at the Super Bowl? Oh, that's a good question. It's something that we kind of touch on occasionally. I think historically, creative awarded ads have usually correlated well with System 1. I think recently, less so. I think typically creative awards tend to go for novelty and purpose, usually is what gets rewarded. It's the degree to which it challenges convention or does something good for society. So, I mean, like if you look at you know, the ads that did well, like Reese as an example, that's not, I hope I don't offend anyone on the call, but that's not the kind of ad that's going to get an award kind of for creativity, but it's highly effective, and it's using things that we know work well in advertising. So yeah, there is a difference between what is effective and what is awarded. Often the case. What was your kind of Pepsi experience, Dawn, in terms of, did you value awards? Did you enter, you know, or were you more measured on effectiveness?
We were definitely more measured on effectiveness, but there was an element when I was in the agency business, and I appreciate it as a brand person, that if a brand is given a lot of awards, then that makes talent want to go work on those. Yeah. So some of the best creative people want to go work on the brands they know have the confidence to do big work. So there was some benefit, but I would say we were more pleased with effectiveness awards.
I'll have to go quite quickly. I'll try and do a super fast answer because we're closing in on time here. Maria was asking about the Lindt ad. Didn't seem breakthrough or unique. Was it the branding that pushed up the score? Advantage of showing chocolate, familiarity with the Fluent device. So yeah, branding, the chocolate, and it was also quite a beautifully shot ad as well. So getting the basics right. And also in a category where the averages are quite high as well. Fiona says she knows from the podcast that I've been advocating for the return of humor and less purpose. Quite right. And does the Super Bowl suggest that that's the road we're going down? I think it does. And even Cannes Lions have also introduced a category for humor. So humor is back, everybody, which is great. And for bonus points, she said, how did the Jesus ad do? Sadly, it was one of the lower performing ones. And actually, interestingly as well, the very powerful anti-Semitism ones as well. I think sometimes with profound topics, you sometimes can alienate people, or you create a lot of sadness because it's dealing with difficult topics. So I think, and you also get lower brand attribution as people are not sure how to attribute it. So That's the reason some of those were further down. Most of the ads seem to employ humor as their main emotion. Is there room for more ads to rely on other emotions? Pfizer being a good example. Yeah, you're quite right. So the emotion that we see time and time again being most powerful is happiness. But within happiness is a plethora of different emotions, and pride or excitement or awe, inspiring, and so on. So there are lots of different positive emotions you can play with. So I think that's definitely the case. I think we've come to time, and I'm really sorry because I don't think we've covered everyone's questions. But a massive, massive thank you, Dawn, for coming in and sharing your experience, which is amazing to have. And you've added so much richness and depth to our discussion. It's been great. Thank you to everybody that's joined us for this as well. If you signed up, you'll get a copy of this webinar. And I believe you'll also get a copy of our Super Bowl report with all the data and stats. You can knock yourself out with all the information that we've got. So it's coming your way. But thank you very much for giving up your time. And I hope you enjoyed the Super Bowl, and hope you got something out of this conversation about the ads. We'll see you next time. Thank you.